Let me, first of all, mention something that's always been a little bit, we've talked about quite a bit of time. You know, the American people are not really aware of the threats that we're faced. I think we all understand that. And the problem with this is for us to have the proper priorities for our military. I think it's necessary for the American people to understand why we're having to do all this. And you still see things that are happening that they still believe that we have the best of everything and nothing to worry about because that's how it's always been and so forth. But they don't realize that how fast China has modernized and the problems that we're facing out there. And Admiral Davidson, what do you think that can be done? Our military has come forth. General Dunford, when he said, we have lost our qualitative and quantitative edge over the adversaries. Milley said, in terms of artillery, the Army is outranged and outgunned by our adversaries. Same thing was true with Moran in talking about the Hornet fleet. And, you know, I've been on the Senate and the House Armed Services Committee for many, many years. I don't ever remember a time when the military has come forth with the shot of realism like they have recently. And I'd like to know, you know, what can you guys do more to make the American people more aware of the threats that we face? You try your mic.
Thank you very much, Senator, for your question. The advances made by China especially, but the other threats I articulated in the region, Russia specifically, in the 21st century has really been profound. While our nation has been focused on the efforts of land wars in Southeast Asia, these advances have been basically unchecked with the economic power that China has brought to bear, and they have greatly advanced their capability truly in all domains. You mentioned space. From what was essentially a handful of satellites at the turn of the century has now become hundreds of satellites, capabilities in communications, in surveillance and reconnaissance, and other capabilities in space. If I move it all the way down through air, they've now got 4th and 5th generation fighters, which were not there at the beginning of the century. And they have now advanced surface and submarine assets that they also did not enjoy at the turn of the century. The time to invest in these things is now. I'm quite encouraged by all the concepts that you've seen come forward from the services, from multi-domain task force to the distributed maritime operations, as well as the commitments and the profiles that services have begun to make in being able to operate in these multi-domains where these advances have taken place.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, but also, we're also seeing them rubbing our noses in it. You know, we've not seen this before. Admiral Greenert wrote a recent paper that his Chinese counterpart, the head of the PLA Navy, was surprised that the United States did not have a more, I'm quoting now, a more forceful reaction when China began its island building in 2013. And so they're actually talking about us. And where this is reflected is with our allies. Several of us in this committee were in the South China Seas just a short while ago. And our allies, you know, they're almost looking at what's happening in the South China Seas with the island building and all of that as the Chinese preparing for World War III. And, you know, which side are we going to be on? And so that's something that does bother me. I think also it's affecting a lot of the attitudes. I know that Xi Jinping said that he would not, and this is his quote, abandon the use of force as a potential means of achieving the unification of Taiwan. Now, you know, what more can we do to try to overcome this this attitude that's out there and is having an adverse effect on our allies? Any thoughts on that?
In the operational space, one of the things we've been able to do in just the last 5 months, Senator, is to get our allies and partners to join us in the South China Sea. Not all of their operations are defined as freedom of navigation operations as we would define them, but their willingness to sail independently in there, to work with us on exercises demonstrates the international commitment to maintaining the freedom of those seas and airways. And I think it's critically important to messaging China that it's not just the United States that is concerned about the freedom of the South China Seas, but indeed all nations. And I expect allies and partners to continue to help here in the months ahead, both with some combined operations that we'll be executing, as well as some individual operations as well. One of the other factors that we're working on in the diplomatic space is to help ASEAN in this discussion about code of conduct negotiations with China. China has essentially delivered a draft that dictates to those ASEAN nations when and where and who they would sail within the South China Sea, helping them protect the international freedoms of the seas and airspace that have been long established in maritime law that the United States and others have fought for over the centuries is quite important.
Yeah, well, that's good. And my time has expired, General Abrams, but we'll have a question for the record having to do with South Korea and what's going on in the place. Senator Reid.